Hey everyone, my name is Ben, and until recently, I thought my life was pretty straightforward. I had a steady rhythm in place, living in a cozy, well-tended suburban neighborhood with my wife, Megan, and our two kids, Liam and Sophie. We've been married for a solid decade, and in my mind, we were doing all right. Maybe even better than all right. I managed projects for a local construction firm, a demanding job, sure, but it allowed me enough time to actually be around for my family. I liked knowing I could make it to Liam's soccer games or help Sophie with her art projects. Megan had chosen to stay home after Sophie was born, a choice she embraced with dedication. She seemed to take genuine joy in keeping our home warm and welcoming. The house itself? A bit modest, but it was ours, a real family haven, filled with laughter, love, and admittedly, an endless array of toys strewn across every floor. Our home sat on a quiet little cul-de-sac. Oak trees lined the street, their thick branches creating a shaded tunnel over the sidewalks where our kids spent afternoons racing bikes or drawing chalk murals. The neighbors were the kind you'd be lucky to have. The kind who'd water your plants if you went out of town or invite you over for weekend barbecues. It felt like something out of a postcard, almost too perfect at times. Liam, our oldest at 8, was a lively kid with boundless curiosity. He could spend hours outside, kicking a soccer ball, or inside, lost in his Lego creations, building everything from castles to spaceships. Sophie, 6, was our little dreamer, soft-spoken, but with a spark in her eye and a penchant for anything pink or glittery. She could get lost for hours with her dolls, weaving her own little stories, and loved when Megan or I played along. And then there was Megan, the heart of our family, really. She had this effortless way of making everything feel like home. From the smell of fresh cookies that would drift through the kitchen on random afternoons to the way she'd hum old songs while folding laundry. I felt lucky, blessed even, to have that kind of life. But I suppose that's the thing about a picture-perfect life. You don't always see the cracks until they're too big to ignore. Looking back now, I realized those cracks had already started to show, little things that didn't quite add up, quiet shifts in Megan's behavior, and a certain distance that had crept in between us. But I wasn't really paying attention. I was caught up in the day-to-day routine, convinced that the love we'd built was solid, unshakable. And I never thought to question it. It all began with small changes, the kind that, if you're not looking for them, can slip by unnoticed. Megan had become more attached to her phone, always glued to it, texting, scrolling, laughing softly at some unseen comment. At first, I thought nothing of it. Everyone's a bit phone crazy these days, right? But then, when I'd walk into the room, she'd quickly put her phone down, or if I asked what was funny, she'd brush it off, changing the subject like it was no big deal. Then, her appearance started to change too. Megan had always had a relaxed, casual style, jeans, a simple shirt, a sundress if it was warm. But lately, she'd been putting in extra effort, wearing makeup even on days she wasn't going out, buying new clothes, some that felt, well, different, a little more daring. There was even new lingerie tucked away, things I hadn't seen her wear in a long time. When I asked her about it, she simply said, "I just wanted to feel good about myself again," with a soft smile. And of course, I supported her. I wanted her to feel beautiful. But in the back of my mind, a quiet doubt started to whisper, hinting that something wasn't quite right. Our physical relationship, once so full of energy and warmth, began to fade, turning into a routine that felt hollow, almost mechanical. I tried to bring it up a few times, suggesting we find ways to reconnect, but she'd brush me off, claiming she was too tired or stressed. I told myself it was just the demands of parenting, the pressures of managing a home, but I missed the closeness we used to share, the easy intimacy that had been the backbone of our marriage. Then, the late-night calls started. She'd step out of the room to answer, her voice low, almost secretive. If I asked, she'd shrug it off, saying it was her mom or a friend. But the way she dodged my eyes afterward didn't feel right. The more I tried to shake it off, the harder it became to ignore. Little by little, I began to feel like a stranger in my own home, like I was locked out of a part of Megan's life she wasn't willing to share. One day, I noticed a name that kept flashing on Megan's phone, Alex. It wasn't a name I recognized, and I'm sure I'd remember if she had ever mentioned someone by that name. But then, she brought him up once or twice, saying he was a friend from high school who had recently reached out. She said it casually, as if there was nothing unusual about it. Just an old friend catching up, she'd laugh, brushing it off. At first, I try not to read too much into it. People reconnect with old friends all the time. But after a while, I couldn't ignore the frequency of their texts, the times she'd linger on her phone, seemingly lost in whatever they were discussing. It was more than just a simple reconnection. I wanted to trust her, to believe that there was nothing to worry about. But the growing stack of signs was getting too hard to brush off. One evening, while Megan was in the shower, I found myself staring at her phone on the nightstand. My heart raced as I wrestled with my own guilt. I never wanted to be the kind of husband who snoops, but the pull to know what was going on was overpowering. I picked up her phone, my fingers trembling as I unlocked it and went into her messages. Most of the texts were casual enough, mentions of old memories, conversations about mutual friends, and the occasional joke. But then, as I scrolled further back, I started to see another side of their exchanges. The messages took on a flirty tone, little comments that held too much weight, the kind of words you say when you're thinking about someone in ways you probably shouldn't be. And then I saw them. Messages that left no room for doubt about the true nature of their relationship. I miss you so much. I can't wait to see you again. I swallowed, feeling my hands go cold as I kept reading. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about it. And then, I wish you were here with me right now. My world shattered. Those few lines changed everything. Megan, my Megan, the woman I'd loved for 10 years, the mother of our children, was having an affair. I felt as if the ground had been pulled from under me. My chest tightened, and I had to remind myself to breathe. I put her phone back where I'd found it, trying to act normal, trying to keep my own face from betraying the storm raging inside. Inside, I felt everything breaking apart. Anger, hurt, disbelief. They all swirled around like a storm I couldn't escape. How could she do this? What did I do wrong? 1,000 questions spun in my mind, each one hitting harder than the last. I wanted to confront her right then, to demand answers, but I also wanted to be sure. I needed more proof, a way to fully understand the scope of what was happening before I accused her of something so life-altering. So over the next few days, I observed more closely, watching every little detail. Every time she smiled at her phone or made an excuse to leave the house, my suspicions grew. I felt like a detective in my own home, scrutinizing every interaction, putting together a puzzle that no one ever wants to solve. It was a lonely place to be, trapped in a world where doubt and mistrust were my constant companions. But I needed to know. I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I waited, gathering every piece of evidence I could, bracing myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. Then, there was the day everything came crashing down. It's burned into my memory, impossible to forget. It was a Saturday, and Megan was getting ready to go out, something she often did to run errands. But today, she was acting different, a nervous energy surrounding her, as if she were about to do something she wasn't supposed to. She spent extra time in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair, picking out clothes that seemed more suited for a date than a quick trip to the grocery store. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just an ordinary day. After she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her, my heart racing as I tried to keep a safe distance. Guilt clawed at me, telling me I shouldn't be doing this, but I pushed it aside. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. She drove through town, making a couple of stops that seemed routine enough. The grocery store, the dry cleaner. But then, she took a left onto a quieter road, one that led toward the outskirts of town. I stayed close, keeping enough distance so she wouldn't notice, feeling my heart pound with every mile we traveled. Finally, she pulled into a small, empty parking lot near a secluded nature reserve. I parked a bit farther back, hidden from view, feeling my heart race as I waited. It was a spot that held countless memories for me, a place Megan and I used to sneak off to when we were first dating, a quiet haven away from everyone else. Seeing her pull into that familiar lot now filled me with a flood of nostalgia and a gut-wrenching dread. I parked far enough back to stay out of sight and watched, my heart sinking, as another car pulled up beside hers. My blood turned ice cold when I recognized who stepped out. It was Alex, my brother. For a moment, my mind refused to process what I was seeing. How could it possibly be him? Images of the messages I'd read on her phone flashed through my mind, and suddenly, everything fell into place with sickening clarity. The betrayal went so much deeper than I had imagined. I watched, frozen in disbelief, as Alex walked up to Megan's car. She stepped out, and they wrapped their arms around each other, their kiss lingering far longer than anything I could explain away. My stomach twisted. I felt like I was going to be sick. My own brother, my flesh and blood, was the one she'd been having an affair with. The pain cut from both sides, and I felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under me. I couldn't just sit there, watching them. My anger surged, blurring my thoughts, and before I knew it, I was out of my car, walking toward them with all the fury I'd been holding back. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't even notice me until I was right on top of them. "Well, isn't this cozy?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm, laced with all the bitterness that had been building inside me. Megan and Alex sprang apart, their faces a mess of shock and guilt. "Ben, what are you doing here?" Megan stammered, her eyes wide, a fearful look shadowing her face. I narrowed my eyes. "I should be asking you that, but I think I already have a pretty clear picture of what's going on." My voice shook with anger, but I kept it steady, glaring between the two of them. Alex stepped forward, his face torn between guilt and something that almost looked like defiance. "Ben, listen, it's not what you think. Don't even try." I shot back, cutting him off. "I know exactly what this is. How long has this been going on? How long have you two been sneaking around behind my back?" Megan burst into tears, covering her face with her hands as if they could hide her shame. Alex stood there, looking at me, ashamed yet stubborn. He finally muttered, "Ben, I'm sorry. We never meant for it to go this far." I felt a rush of rage. The words "go this far" echoed in my mind, stoking the fury inside me. "Go this far?" I repeated, voice trembling. "Did you think about that when you started sleeping with my wife? Did you stop to think about what it might do to me? To our family?" My words cut like knives, and I didn't care. They deserved to feel every ounce of pain they had inflicted on me. Megan tried to reach out, her hand trembling as she extended it toward me, but I stepped back, holding up my hand to stop her. "Don't," I warned coldly, my voice almost a whisper. "Just don't." Alex looked like he was about to say something, but I silenced him with a glare, pointing at him, my voice low but fierce. "You," I said, feeling the weight of my words. "You are no longer my brother. As far as I'm concerned, you're dead to me." I turned to Megan, feeling the sorrow and betrayal breaking through my anger. "And you," I said, my voice cracking as I spoke. "How could you? To me? To our family?" Megan was sobbing now, unable to look at me, her face in her hands as if the tears could somehow erase what she'd done. I took a step back, shaking my head in utter disbelief, trying to comprehend how everything had fallen apart so completely. "I hope it was worth it," I said quietly, voice barely above a whisper, before turning on my heel and walking back to my car. I couldn't be there, couldn't look at them a second longer. As I drove away, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my mind a storm of emotions I couldn't sort through. The image of them, together in our special place, was burned into my memory, a scar that I knew would never fade. The betrayal was complete, and there was no going back. The life I thought I knew, the love I once trusted completely, had been shattered beyond recognition. In the days following my discovery, I moved through life like a ghost, numb from the inside out, gripped by a storm of anger, pain, and an insatiable need for justice. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together, their betrayal etched into my mind, replaying in a tormenting loop. There was no escape from it. Even the smallest moments were clouded with images of their deceit. The thought of them carrying on as though nothing had happened, leaving me to somehow rebuild what they had destroyed, was unbearable. I couldn't let them get away with it. They needed to understand the depth of what they'd done. Late one night, as I lay wide awake, staring at the ceiling, a dark idea took root. a way to make them feel the consequences. Confronting them wasn't enough. They deserved a taste of real loss, something to hit them hard. Gradually, a plan began to form, something they wouldn't easily forget, and that couldn't be linked back to me. It was a risky move, but the overwhelming desire to make them pay smothered any hesitation. Megan's car had always been her pride. A silver SUV she cared for obsessively, almost as if it were a part of her identity. And Alex? He was in love with that flashy red convertible of his, always polishing it, showing it off as if it added something to his worth. They both deserved to know what it felt like to lose something they valued. For days, I plotted, making sure every step was precise. When the night finally came, I dressed in dark clothing, gloves on, and drove to Megan's house. I parked a couple of blocks away, under cover of shadows, and approached her car in the driveway. It gleamed under the dim streetlight, a symbol of the life she was so eager to protect at my expense. I moved quietly, feeling my heart race, each step echoing my determination. With a small tool, I punctured her tires one by one, listening as the air hissed out quietly into the stillness of the night. I took a small container of sugar from my bag and poured it into the gas tank, knowing it would wreak havoc on the engine, damage that wouldn't easily trace back to me. Finally, I took the tool to the side of her car, dragging it along the paint, leaving deep, jagged scars. The once pristine SUV looked ruined and broken, a fitting reflection of what she had done to me. After leaving Megan's house, I drove across town to Alex's. His convertible was parked out front, still pristine, still flashing that obnoxious red that screamed for attention. I repeated the process, puncturing the tires, pouring sugar into the gas tank, and etching long scratches across the paint. By the time I was done, his pride and joy looked like a wreck, a shadow of the car he had cherished so much. With the job done, I slipped back into my car and drove home, a dark satisfaction spreading through me. They'd wake up to find their prized possessions ruined, a small piece of the pain they'd inflicted on me. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt for stooping to this, but it quickly dissolved into a sense of cold justification. They had shattered my trust in the worst way possible, and now they would feel the sting of betrayal too. The next morning, I waited in silence, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and calm as I watched my phone. It didn't take long for the messages to start pouring in from Megan, frantic and desperate. Each new text and missed call was another jolt of panic and confusion from her, reaching for help, an explanation, anything. I ignored every message, letting her spiral as I sat back. Then came Alex's call, his voice trembling with rage. "Ben, I know you did this. My car is trashed, and so is Megan's. What the hell were you thinking?" I took a deep breath, keeping my tone steady. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Alex. Maybe you've got some bad karma coming your way." He almost growled, spitting out his words. "You son of a... This isn't over, Ben. You can't just..." I hung up, tossing the phone aside with a faint smile. Hearing the desperation in Alex's voice, sensing his frustration, was a small victory. I knew it wouldn't mend the betrayal or ease the pain gnawing at me, but it was something, a sliver of control, a tangible way to channel my anger. For the first time since I'd uncovered the affair, I felt like I had a foothold, a way to make them feel even a fraction of what they'd done to me. Over the next few days, Megan and Alex scrambled to deal with the fallout. Their attempts to fix the damage only added to their misery. Insurance claims were complicated, and I knew the repairs would be costly. Watching them struggle with the financial mess they created felt like a bitter but satisfying twist of fate. This was the reality of their actions, a price they'd have to pay for their deception, a reminder that betrayal didn't come without consequence. But my revenge was only the beginning. I knew I wasn't done yet. The time had come for a face-to-face confrontation with Megan. I needed to hear her justifications, to understand the choices that had shattered our life together. The revenge had given me clarity, the strength to take the next step forward. There were still questions that demanded answers, truths I needed to pull from her, no matter how painful they might be. I'd ignored her calls and texts over the past few days, each message from her sounding more anxious and desperate than the last. She wanted to talk, to explain, but I wasn't ready. I needed to gather my thoughts, prepare myself for the emotional storm I knew was about to unfold. I decided the best place to confront her would be at our house, a place where we could face each other in private. The kids were at school, which gave us the perfect window. I sent her a text. "Megan, I'm coming over. We need to talk." Her response came almost immediately, her words fraught with tension. "Ben, please, we need to work this out. Come over, and we'll talk." When I arrived, she was already waiting at the door, looking worn and drained. Her eyes were swollen, rimmed with redness, as though she hadn't stopped crying in days. She reached out, as if to comfort me, but I held back, stepping out of her reach. "Ben, please come inside," she whispered, her voice breaking. I followed her into the living room, the same room where we'd spent years making memories, raising our kids, building a life. Now it felt foreign, like a battlefield littered with invisible scars. We sat down, each of us taking opposite ends of the couch, with an emotional chasm stretching between us. "Why, Megan?" I began, my voice barely holding steady. "Why did you do it? Why am—" She lowered her gaze, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "I never meant for it to happen, Ben," she whispered. "It just did. Alex and we reconnected, and they got out of hand." "Reconnected?" I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. "Out of hand? That's your excuse? You were having an affair with my own brother. How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, her silence heavy with guilt before she finally sighed. "A few months. It started at the family reunion. We started talking, and one thing just led to another." I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest, tightening my throat. "A few months?" I echoed. "You've been lying to me, deceiving me, for months? How could you do that to me, to Liam and Sophie, to our family?" Tears spilled down her cheeks, her face etched with remorse. "I know I hurt you, Ben," she sobbed, "but I was lonely. You were always working, and I felt neglected. Alex was there for me, and her voice broke as she looked away. "I made a terrible mistake." "Lonely," I snapped, struggling to hold back my own emotions. "Neglected? I was working to provide for this family, to make sure you and the kids had a good life. And this is how you repay me?" Her sobs grew louder, but I wasn't finished. "And what about Alex?" I demanded, my voice rising with each word. "My own brother? Did either of you even stop to think about what this would do to me? To our family?" "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she whispered, wiping her face with trembling hands. "We never meant to hurt you, Ben." "But you did," I replied, my voice cold and steady. "You hurt me more than you can imagine, and now you have to live with the consequences." She looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with desperation. "Ben, please. I love you. I want to fix this. I want to make things right." "Love?" I laughed bitterly, a hollow sound in the tense silence. "You call this love? You've shattered our marriage, broken our family apart. How do you expect to fix that?" She reached out to me, her hand trembling, but I recoiled, keeping my distance. "It's too late, Megan. The damage is done. I can't trust you anymore. I can't live like this." Her face crumpled as she broke down in tears. "What do you want me to do?" she cried, her voice cracking. "I'll do anything, Ben." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision I was about to make. "I want a divorce," I said, the words landing like a final blow. "And I want full custody of Liam and Sophie. You can have visitation, but they need stability. They need to be with someone they can trust." Her face paled as she collapsed to her knees, her body shaking with uncontrollable sobs. "Please, Ben," she begged, her voice raw with emotion. "Don't do this. Don't take the kids away from me." I stood up, feeling a strange mixture of sorrow and determination. "You should have thought about that before you betrayed me, Megan. This is the path you chose. Now you have to face the consequences." As I turned and walked toward the door, her voice rang out, broken and pleading. "Ben, please, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. Anything, just give me a chance." I stopped and looked back at her, the woman I had once loved deeply, now a stranger cloaked in betrayal. There's nothing left to work through, Megan. You destroyed everything we had. I hope it was worth it. With that, I left the house, her sobs echoing behind me. The confrontation had given me some sense of closure, but the pain still clung to me, raw and relentless. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, but the road ahead was long and uncertain. As I drove away, my phone buzzed, a new message from Alex lighting up the screen. My instinct was to ignore it, to let the silence speak for itself. But I knew, deep down, that this was a conversation I couldn't avoid. I pulled over, heart pounding, and opened the message from Alex. "Ben, we need to talk. Please give me a chance to explain." My reply was short, cold. "There's nothing to explain, Alex. You and Megan made your choices. Now you both have to live with them." His response came almost instantly. "I'm sorry, Ben. I never meant to hurt you. Can we at least meet and talk?" I hesitated, staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to cut him out entirely. But there was another part, a wounded side that needed to face him to understand how he could betray me like this. "Fine," I typed. "Meet me at the old park at 4 p.m. I arrived at the park early, parking near the edge of the lot and watching the familiar surroundings, now tinged with bitter memories. This was where Alex and I had spent countless afternoons as kids, racing our bikes down the paths, playing catch in the open fields. I used to see this place as a reminder of simpler times, of brotherhood. Now, it felt tainted, like every memory had been turned on its head. A few minutes later, Alex pulled in, stepping out of his car, looking disheveled, guilt written all over his face. We stood in silence, the tension between us thick enough to cut through. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, heavy with regret. "Ben, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I never meant for this to happen." I glared at him, my anger barely contained. "You never meant for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice laced with sarcasm and disbelief. "You were sleeping with my wife, Alex. My wife. How could you even think of doing something like that to me?" He looked down, as if my words physically struck him, unable to meet my gaze. I don't know. It just happened. We got close, and I lost control." "Lost control?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. "That's your excuse? You destroyed my marriage, tore apart my family, because you lost control? You make me sick." "Ben, please," he pleaded, looking desperate. "I know I can't take back what I did, but I want to make things right. I'll do whatever it takes." I shook my head, feeling a surge of anger mixed with an overwhelming sadness. "There's nothing you can do, Alex. You've ruined everything. I don't want anything to do with you. As far as I'm concerned, you're not my brother anymore." His face crumpled as he tried to hold back tears, but I couldn't find it in me to care. The betrayal ran too deep, the damage irreparable. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there alone, a broken man. As I reached my car, I felt a strange sense of relief. Confronting him had been cathartic, a way to release the pain I'd been holding inside. But it hadn't erased the ache or made everything better. I knew the path to healing would be long and difficult, but I was determined to find a way forward. My next step was to finalize the divorce, to secure a fresh start for myself, and most importantly for Liam and Sophie. The days leading up to the divorce trial blurred together, filled with endless legal documents and emotional turmoil. My lawyer, Samantha, was a fierce advocate, relentless in her determination to secure full custody of my kids. I felt a deep gratitude for her resolve, for her support in this dark time when I needed it most. My days became a balancing act between work and meetings with Samantha, preparing for the trial, and my evenings were spent comforting Liam and Sophie, who were struggling to make sense of everything. I could see the confusion and pain in their eyes, could feel their fear and sadness at the change ripping through our family. They'd ask questions, "Why can't mom and dad live together?" Or, "Are things ever going to be the same?" And I'd do my best to answer gently, reassuring them that no matter what, they were loved and would always have a home with me. Meanwhile, Megan had tried to reach out several times, her voicemails growing more frantic and tearful with each message. She begged for a chance to explain, for an opportunity to make things right. But I couldn't bring myself to listen to them. The betrayal was too fresh, the trust too shattered to be pieced back together. Each time her name flashed on my phone, I felt a renewed wave of anger and sadness, a reminder of the depth of her deceit. As the trial date approached, my focus sharpened. Winning custody of Liam and Sophie had become my top priority. I knew they needed stability, a safe place to heal from the chaos. I was determined to give them that, no matter how long it took or how hard the journey might be. On the morning of the trial, I woke up to a knot of anxiety mixed with a fierce determination. I'd spent weeks preparing myself for this moment, but now that the day had arrived, the thought of facing Megan and Alex in court weighed heavily. I got dressed slowly, pulling on a suit I hadn't worn since before all this began, trying to steady my nerves. I joined Liam and Sophie for a quick breakfast, doing my best to mask my own unease as I chatted with them, reminding them that things would be okay. Their innocent faces were a reminder of why I was doing this, why I was fighting so hard. After breakfast, I headed to the courthouse with Samantha by my side. She was focused, already thumbing through files and notes, her dedication a constant source of strength for me. When we arrived, the courtroom felt cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the warmth I used to feel in my home before everything fell apart. Across the room, Megan sat looking drained, pale, and exhausted, her eyes darting nervously around. Just behind her sat Alex, his expression unreadable, yet marked by an air of regret. I avoided eye contact with both of them, focusing solely on the task ahead. This was about securing a future for my children, about rebuilding stability in the wake of betrayal. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s with an air of quiet authority, called the court to order, and the proceedings began. Samantha rose first, presenting our case with her usual calm precision, each point sharp and clear. She laid out the facts, presenting evidence of Megan's affair and emphasizing the impact it had not just on me, but on the well-being of Liam and Sophie. She argued passionately that our children needed stability and that I was the best person to provide it. I sat quietly, watching her, feeling a surge of gratitude for her skill and dedication. Megan's lawyer countered, portraying her as a loving, devoted mother who had made a serious mistake but was determined to be there for her kids. When Megan took the stand, tears streamed down her face as she pleaded for joint custody, her voice breaking as she spoke about her love for Liam and Sophie. She described moments of motherhood, painting herself as someone who wanted to make things right, to be there for our children despite everything. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the weight of everything we had lost pressing down on me. I spoke honestly, my voice raw with emotion, describing the betrayal and the pain it had inflicted on me and on the family we'd built. I emphasized my commitment to provide a steady, loving home for Liam and Sophie, a place where they could feel safe and secure. I want Megan to be in their lives, I said, glancing at her briefly. But for now, they need a consistent home base. I believe that should be with me. Hours passed with testimony and cross-examinations, each moment stretching longer than the last. Finally, the judge called for a recess, and we all stepped out into the hallway. I paced back and forth, the reality of the moment pressing down on me. Samantha tried to reassure me, but the uncertainty hung thick in the air. I thought about every worst-case scenario, about what it would mean to lose custody of my children. After what felt like an eternity, we were called back in. The judge began to deliver her verdict, her voice measured and steady. In light of the evidence and in consideration of the children's best interests, I am granting full custody to Ben. She continued, Megan will have visitation rights. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming, but it was laced with a lingering sadness. This wasn't a victory, not in any real sense. It was simply a step I had to take to protect my kids, to give them the stability they deserved. As we were leaving the courtroom, Megan approached me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked defeated, a shadow of the woman I'd once loved. Ben, she began, her voice breaking, please. I know I messed up, But I love our kids. Don't shut me out of their lives. I took a deep breath, doing my best to keep my emotions in check. Megan, I said, meeting her gaze, I want what's best for them. Right now, they need stability, and that's what I'm going to give them. But I'm not shutting you out. You'll still see them. You'll still be a part of their lives. But they're going to be different. She nodded, her tears falling freely now. Thank you, Ben. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you. We stood there for a moment, a heavy silence between us, each of us feeling the weight of what had happened and what was lost. Without another word, I turned and walked away, my focus fixed on the future. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjusting to our new reality. Liam and Sophie struggled with the changes, their questions a constant reminder of the upheaval in their young lives. I tried to shield them from the weight of it all, to be there with reassurance and patience as we began to find a new rhythm. I kept them busy with outings and activities, filling our days with trips to the park, movie nights, and weekends spent building forts in the backyard. Each night, I tucked them in, reading stories until they drifted off, making sure they felt safe and loved. There were moments, quiet ones after they'd gone to bed, when the loneliness would settle in, a reminder of the life we'd once had and the emptiness left behind. But I held on to hope, believing that in time, we would heal. Megan began visiting regularly, and while our interactions were tense, we managed to keep things civil for Liam and Sophie's sake. The sting of her betrayal hadn't faded, and I knew it would take time, if ever, to let go of the resentment. But for the kids, I had to learn to coexist with her. One evening, after dropping the kids off at Megan for the weekend, she asked if we could talk. I hesitated, but I agreed, understanding that we needed to find a way forward, if not for ourselves, then for our children. We sat on the porch, a cool breeze in the evening air bringing a little comfort to the tension between us. Megan looked at me, her eyes brimming with regret and a vulnerability I hadn't seen in a long time. Ben, she began softly, I know I've said this before, but I'm truly sorry. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to make amends. I want to be a better mother, a better person. I nodded slowly, feeling the anger and hurt simmer beneath the surface, a reminder of everything we'd lost. I appreciate that, Megan, I replied carefully. But it's going to take time. Trust isn't something that can just be rebuilt overnight. She looked down, a tear slipping down her cheek. I understand, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. For a moment, we sat in silence, the memories of what we'd shared and the pain of what we'd lost hanging heavy between us. Finally, I stood, signaling that it was time to leave. Good night, Megan. Good night, Ben, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As I drove home, a sense of closure settled over me. The journey to healing was far from over, but I had taken the first steps. The trial had marked a turning point, an opportunity to begin again. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was prepared to face them, for the sake of my children and myself. The next chapter of our lives was just beginning, and I was ready to embrace it with cautious hope. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. After the divorce was finalized, Liam, Sophie, and I moved into a new house on the other side of town. It was smaller than our old home, but cozy, perfect for the three of us and filled with possibilities. As we unpacked, I hung family photos on the walls, wanting to surround Liam and Sophie with memories of love and stability, a promise of the secure home they deserved. Adjusting to this new life took time, as the kids grappled with the separation from their mother. I did my best to create a nurturing environment for them, filling our days with routines and moments of laughter. We established new traditions: Friday night movie marathons, Saturday board game nights, and Sunday mornings spent making pancakes, filling the house with the smell of maple syrup and laughter. Little by little, we found our rhythm, and a new sense of family began to blossom. Megan continued to visit regularly, and while our relationship was strained, we made it work for the sake of the kids. I made it clear that honesty and respect were now non-negotiable. I wouldn't tolerate any more deception, and she seemed to understand the seriousness of that. We weren't partners anymore, but we were united in our commitment to Liam and Sophie. Throughout it all, the support of friends and family became my lifeline. My parents were an unwavering source of strength, always ready with a warm meal, an extra hand, or a listening ear when I needed it most. My brother, David, stepped up in ways I hadn't expected, helping me navigate the challenges of single parenthood and offering advice that I leaned on heavily. His presence was a reminder that not all family bonds were broken. I also reconnected with old friends, people I'd lost touch with over the years as life's demands had pulled me away. They welcomed me back with open arms, giving me a sense of community that I had sorely missed. Slowly, I began attending social gatherings again, sharing laughter and stories over coffee or weekend barbecues, finding comfort in the simple joy of friendship. As time passed, our new home filled with warmth and love, the three of us building something fresh from the ruins. It was far from perfect, and there were still difficult days, but I knew we were moving forward. Each step was a reminder that healing was possible, that new beginnings could emerge even from the most painful endings. I looked to the future with cautious hope, ready to rebuild, not just for myself, but for Liam and Sophie, determined to show them that even in the wake of heartbreak, love and resilience would carry us through. One warm afternoon, I took Liam and Sophie to the park. The sun was shining, and the park was alive with the laughter of children and the buzz of families enjoying the weekend. Liam raced off to the jungle gym, his excitement infectious, while Sophie ran straight to the swings, calling out for me to give her a push. As I watched them play, a quiet peace settled over me, a rare but welcome calm that reminded me of how far we'd come. Despite the hardships, the pain, and the moments I wasn't sure I could make it through, we were slowly but surely healing. Our new life was taking shape, each day bringing with it a little more hope, a little more reassurance that we were on the right path. While I stood by the swings, my attention was drawn to a woman sitting on a nearby bench, absorbed in a book. She glanced up, catching my eye, and gave me a warm smile. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of interest, of curiosity. Her name was Anna, as I would soon learn, and she was at the park with her niece and nephew. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself drawn to her kindness and the genuine warmth in her eyes. There was a quiet strength about her, a calmness that seemed to ease the lingering tension I'd been carrying. As we talked, I discovered that she too had been through her own struggles and understood the delicate process of rebuilding. That understanding between us became the foundation of a gentle, unexpected connection. Over the next few weeks, Anna and I started spending more time together. She never pushed, never tried to speed up our pace, respecting my need for caution and allowing things to develop naturally. Our relationship grew slowly, grounded in mutual respect, shared stories, and moments of laughter that began to fill my life again in a way I hadn't thought possible. Anna was a breath of fresh air, a reminder that life could still hold joys, even after heartbreak. Introducing her to Liam and Sophie felt like a monumental step. I was nervous, unsure of how they would react to someone new, but to my relief, they took to her quickly. Anna was wonderful with them, patient, playful, and understanding. She quickly became a positive presence in their lives, someone they looked forward to seeing, someone who brought out the best in all of us. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Anna turned to me with a soft smile. "You know, Ben, you're doing an amazing job with the kids. They're lucky to have you." Her words touched me more deeply than she could have known. "Thank you, Anna," I replied, my voice thick with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without your support." Life continued to move forward, and with each passing day, I felt the wounds of the past beginning to heal. I began to forgive myself for the mistakes I'd made, to let go of the anger and resentment that had weighed me down for so long. I focused on creating a future for Liam and Sophie, a life filled with stability, love, and endless opportunities. One sunny afternoon, I watched Liam and Sophie playing in the backyard, their laughter carrying through the air. A profound sense of contentment washed over me. Our journey had been tumultuous, but we had emerged stronger, bound by resilience and hope. Together, we had built a new life, a life full of promise and a sense of home I hadn't thought we'd find again. I glanced at Anna, who was sitting beside me, a peaceful smile on her face as she watched the kids play. She had been a light in my darkest days, a reminder that happiness was still within reach. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for her, for the love and support she had given, for the warmth she had brought into my life and the lives of my children. Our future felt bright, filled with the possibilities of everything we had yet to experience together. The pain of the past had gradually given way to healing and growth, allowing us to rise from the ashes stronger and more resilient. I had rebuilt my life from the ground up, creating a home filled with love and laughter, a place of safety and joy for my children. This journey had been arduous, but it had also transformed me. I was no longer defined by betrayal, but by the strength that had carried me through it. As the sun began to set on that perfect day, casting a warm glow over our home, I knew that the best was still to come. I had found my way back to happiness, ready to embrace the future with open arms. Liam, Sophie, Anna, and the life we had built together were all testaments to the power of love, forgiveness, and the unbreakable resilience of the human heart. Our story was one of redemption and renewal, a reminder that even after profound heartbreak, it's possible to rise, stronger and more determined than ever. And as we sat there, a family united by love and hope, I knew we had finally found our way home. Thank you for joining us for this touching journey of love, betrayal, and redemption. We hope it resonated with you, even brought a little inspiration. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts and reactions in the comments. Feel free to share your own experiences or let us know what kinds of stories you'd like to see next. Thanks again for your support. Until then, take care and stay tuned for more great content. Bye-bye.